guys have graciously donated. I'm gonna sit like this, by the way, because I'm an asshole. But these guys have graciously donated their time to come out and talk about what it's like to do this. And so, I guess I'll start off with the first question, and I think the most important question. You know, the film, I think, is sort of is a self-reflexive kind of case study on how fucking chaotic, tedious, and most times heartbreaking independent filmmaking can be. But on the flip side, though, it's also a really good depiction on how those small victories, those little wins, kind of make all the bullshit worth it. And so, could you guys describe your experiences, one by one, that you've had on independent film sets, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and how those experiences have helped shape you as a filmmaker, as an artist? And we'll start with John.
Make it short.
I'll make it short. So, you know, this movie is kind of awesome because it kind of heightens like what the reality is on an independent film set, which is nothing goes as planned. So you can work as hard as you want to in terms of preparation and how you feel things will go and how you think things will go, but shit happens. And I kind of feel like there's one line in there where Steve Buscemi says, which is just roll with it, and I kind of feel like that is Tom Pisello like speaking like his voice and like, which is kind of like the ethic that you really need to take, which is at some point it's like you could have a plan and you could, but if it isn't working, at some point you just got to let it go and find something that is going to work. So, in my experience, it's like letting go and then just trusting your instincts and saying, okay, what you should definitely go into it with a vision, but also be smart enough to realize, okay, there's other collaborators that are going to be involved in the process, especially your actors, and like what they bring to it, and allowing them to do their thing.
But I think that, like he said, I think that mindset is heightened because a lot of the time nobody's getting paid, and so
right.
If you treat people,
they could walk off.
Exactly.
And you're like, okay, can we shoot this scene without sound?
Yeah. Maybe you can call it a David Lynch film.
First of all, I just have to say, I've known these guys, when I saw they were on the panel, I think from like the 96, 97.
Well, we met when this movie was made.
Yeah, me and Bob were in Austin Filmworks together, Steve Menn's class, and he worked on I think our first feature maybe was Sweet Thing.
Yeah.
You were
Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
I walked off of that set.
You did.
Sorry.
You were smart. You were smart. That was a situation where I don't think it was.
It wasn't related to you, though.
No, I am aware. And yeah, since those days, I've continued to make movies for no money. I don't know what the correlation is.
And in those days, we had to shoot on film too.
Yeah, where you had to spend money, get it processed and transferred. Remember film, guys? Do that? Yeah, you know, the thing about, I think, shooting independent films is that you don't have any money. So if there's a problem, you can't throw money at it to solve it. So you have to be real creative in the way you solve problems. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes that's really bad. It's like, why is half the movie in black and white? Or why is, you know... It seems like there's a scene missing. Oh, well, there is a scene missing. But yeah, and the no money thing, you know, your crew is your most valuable asset. I mean, your cast is too, but everybody wants to act. Everybody wants to be in front of the camera. Everybody wants to be the star. Everybody wants to direct. Not everybody wants to move a C-stand around, you know. So my theory is always, you know, treat your crew as good as you can, but ask them to do things and expect them to do what they say they're going to do, but, you know, keep them as happy as you can. And the roll with it thing, I mean, that's, I always say too, whatever it is what it will be, or what it's supposed to be. If you hold on to some perception about what you want it to be, it so rarely is that thing. Whether it's the script that you wrote and now it's not happening on set, or it just doesn't look that great, or whatever. I mean, in the end, you gotta make your day You got to get the things shot, and you got to get something out, and you can't make everything perfect. You got to kind of know when to compromise, and yeah.
And on the note, it's like with the role with it, it's not necessarily compromising. It's just like especially like I think as a writer, it's you have one idea of how it will unfold, but other people are going to interpret it differently. So it's just saying, like, if you have good taste, like, okay, that works. Okay. And so ultimately, if you're directing something, it's like, yeah, I like that. That actually works, and I believe it. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure Bob's got a lot to say, so I'll be quick. But the other thing with these indie films, and when you're working so hard, is never think you have the best idea, or that your idea is the only idea. My theory is whoever's got the best idea, that's what you do. And sometimes it might be the PA, it might be the producer, it might be a guy standing there watching you shoot. But don't be afraid of other people's ideas, because a lot of times they make you look much better than you can make yourself look.
This movie's so right on. It's just so cringe-inducing to watch, like all the perils and pitfalls that they go through. And I watched the shit out of this movie before I made Rock Opera, which was my first feature back in '99. And I'm glad I did, because it certainly braces you for a lot that you have to deal with. One of the biggest things for me is like knowing exactly what you want. I mean, you write something and you have an idea of how it should feel in your head, and then you've got to bring it to life. You've got to put people into those roles that have been in your head, and you've got to put shots in there, and you have to make sure the shots cut together. And then you have to answer every fucking question from everyone on set. You have to know everything, and you don't know everything. No matter how much you prepare, you can never be prepared for all of the questions that come down the pike. And like Mark said, you might not have the best idea. You might not even know if you have the best idea. You might not know if the best idea came up and bit you in the face, because you're so just bombarded with everything that's happening, particularly when you, like, not to be all old school, but like when you're shooting on film and you're hearing the frames, every one of them burn, click, 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 24 times a second, and you're just thinking, ching, ching, that's my wallet just getting lighter and floating away. And then everyone's donating this time, so you have this huge burden of you've gathered all these people here to work for some stupid-ass idea that you smoked a bong and came up with in your bedroom, and you're all going to work your asses off in the hottest summer ever, which is every summer that happens here. And hopefully, and they're all trusting you. And like when Steve Buscemi gives up here at the end, I had that every night. I went home. I was like, please, God, Satan, Thor, whoever, please let an asteroid pummel the Earth and kill all of mankind, because this is unbearable. But I can't quit. All these people are doing this for me for no other reason than just, I'd show up. We had a truck. We had a camera. They're like, holy shit, this is a real movie. It's like, yes, okay, let's keep going. But there were days that were so painful that I wished Armageddon would happen. But I knew that I couldn't quit. I conned everyone into doing this, and I couldn't quit. But I'm stupid. I do it. I keep doing it. I haven't stopped doing it.
Well, I think one thing the movie really captures is that in any creative process, the one thing that we're all chasing after is that moment. And that's, you kind of step back and you're like, why on earth am I doing this? I could be making great money, doing God knows what, It's because there's a lot of bright people in this business, a lot of creative people. And I think it's one of those things where we're all chasing that moment where everything just comes into focus. It all comes into line, And I think that's one thing that this movie, it sort of like bludgeons you to death until finally, the moment comes together with the grandma or whatever. And even then you're sort of like, wait a second, is that really the moment or not?
That's what you were waiting for.
and I think that's also part of the challenge is, being able to be enough in the zone of the idea, the original idea that you had, so that you know when that idea, when it is happening, whether or not it's coming from, a PA or just the fact that you moved a light or, I work between all different kinds of genres. I do music, I do documentary, I do video art, And then, I started as an actress in the very beginning. Like, my first real big thing was being on a 35 millimeter feature when I was 16 as the star. And then I gave up acting after that. I was like, I want to make movies, because I found my tribe. I figured it out. It's okay to be a vegetarian. It's okay to be insane. And then, once there's a little bit more money for documentaries.
Where?
Through ITDS and stuff like that.
Depending on what kind of
The grant
documentaries you
thing.
make.
Right.
Yeah.
Not ones about Chad Holt.
Right, I'm making the wrong kind of
There's no
documentaries.
grants for that.
There was one time when in this one documentary that I did, I wanted to start the film off with a dance sequence, and I wanted to shoot on 16 millimeter, and we rented the top of the parish, and I was working with Lee Daniel, who's this amazing cinematographer that I convinced to work with me, and also Deb Lewis was there because she's a friend of mine. So I had two of the best cinematographers in town. Scott Kahn is this great, gaffer, lighter, and just works on big budget movies all the time. All these professionals, having faith in me. We lit, the stage, and then I remember Deb, she was kind of had a second camera, and she pointed to me and she said, Karen, look at this. And we had, the dancers practicing, and they were backlit by the windows of the parish, and it was what we hadn't even lit, and she's like, look at how beautiful that is. And we had a smoke machine and everything, and it was like, oh my God. And so we still shot the stuff that we lit, but we turned around and we shot it from the other side too, and it was totally not what we had planned or anything, and I absolutely wound up using it, loved it. It was one of those things where you're just like, wow, looking at the footage, it's like, I can't believe that I own this. Not even because also then it turns into this whole other issue where you're like, okay, well, how much of this can I use in the film? I want to use it all. It's amazing, and and then you have to reel yourself back in. So it's just a constant process of finding that sweet spot, I think. And that was, I think, the thing that hooked me. That I realized, that first time when I was on that other movie, it was that, being able to actually be the puppeteer rather than the puppet. You can find it in acting, you can find it in performing of any kind, but I think there's something, particularly fulfilling about working with a whole group of people, and you're just still trying to stay in that zone of where it's like, okay, is this vibing? Is this gelling? Is this all harmonious? Or is it not? And am I crazy? That's, I don't know. I'd forgotten about. I don't even know if I got that the first time that I saw this, because it was so long ago, and I haven't really seen it since then.
I think it was funnier back when I saw it before I made movies.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of painful.
Yeah.
It's funny, but no.
Yeah.
You mentioned finding that sweet spot, finding that zone. How do you do that in documentary, especially when you're the focus of
Yeah,
the
well,
documentary? When you're living it.
it really helps to work with good people, because then, you're not all on your own. And, I think that's one of the things that I really love about film is that, because it is collaborative and you can lean on the people that you're working with, and it really makes such a huge difference. But I also think that equally, you have to have instincts, and that's the make or break, fiber of whether you're a filmmaker, a true filmmaker, is, not to be snooty about it. I don't mean that in a sort of way, but just, can you, when you're out there and something's happening, can you respond, and how do you respond, and so I think that in a lot of ways, I had wanted to make a bunch of narrative. That's all I wanted to do, and I've been sort of torn in all these different directions by life. But I think that documentary is a really good training place for any kind of storytelling, because you have to learn how to respond. I mean, I guess you could also say that dogma filmmaking or something like that is similar kind of thing, or doing a lot of improvisational theater, or something like that could also equally be good. But just to where you're able to respond, I don't know.
Yeah, you got to find the story because you don't necessarily know exactly where it's going to go.
But is that during shooting, or is that more in post when you're editing?
I think it's both, for sure. I mean, and I think it applies to narrative too. Like you have to, you know, obviously like in documentary it's so much more about, but you know, it's which days you're going to shoot and when, you know, where are you going to put the camera and how are you going to go about it, you know? Are you just going to set up a bunch of interviews, or are you going to, you know, do it all Maisels Brothers style, you know, like what are you going to do? So.
With docs, it's subject and access.
Yeah.
I mean,
but you
it's
gotta
like,
know what
do you have an
battles
interesting
you choose.
subject, and do you have access to it? I mean, that's like, I think 90%.
Well, but it's also approach.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So much of it is approach.
And knowing when to put the camera down and when to pick it up. I mean,
Yeah.
having made a few docs, like, instinct is, I'm not the best craftsman, perhaps. You know, I work my ass off. I work more than anyone that I know. And I probably work more than anyone in here, despite my stoner reputation. And I work my ass off to make sure my movies are as good as they can be, and a lot of that's in post. But having made 2 feature documentaries, you've got to have the flexibility, and you got to follow your gut on where the story's going to take you, especially when you do like linear documentaries, sort of like Hoop Dreams or things like that, where things are unfolding in front of you, and you don't have a predetermined idea of what you're going to shoot. I mean, with Hell on Wheels, I thought I was making a documentary about the rebirth of roller derby, but in reality, I was making a documentary about a grassroots organization that had political turmoil, and roller derby happened to be the setting of that. And so when we went into it all fired up, like, we're going to make this kick-ass rock and roll roller derby documentary, and when we're done, we don't have this kick-ass roller derby documentary. And we're maybe better off for it, because we have a human story that anyone who's been involved in a group like that can relate to. But a lot of that was because as we were in the middle of the tornado, being able to see where things were going and follow your gut and to be able to make these decisions on your toes, that there was absolutely no way to plan for that, because it's like planning for life. You really can't plan for the things that come down the pike. And similarly on the documentary that I made after that, Tell the Badass, I thought it would be about this crazy character, and then it ended up being a family story about how he's dealing with, you know, his family being foreclosed upon and taking responsibility and kind of growing up while still doing all the criminal debauchery things that, you know, that defines the main character.
I gotta see this.
There's graphic sex in it.
Wow.
You guys haven't seen Tell the Badass. You should definitely give it a watch.
Can you, in detail, explain the graphic sex?
As graphic as you can make.
No, you mentioned compromise, Mark. When is it, like in the film, like, I'm making this question off the top of my head, crazy, no. When does it become too much, though? Like, when you compromise too much, you compromise your own vision.
You know,
and it starts to
what I
spiral.
meant by that was just not being, you know, obstinate, not being stubborn, and not allowing things to happen, and not and pushing things away. When I'm never, you know, you shouldn't compromise. It's a
You
bad
should
word.
listen to Chaz.
Yeah.
Ignore that guy.
Which one is Chaz?
He was the douchebag.
Oh, right. He's
Total
the
douchebag.
he's the Brad Pitt stand-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's really about when it feels wrong. You'll know when you're doing something what feels like you can give something away. Like, we don't have time for this, that can go away, and it doesn't hurt, you know, to make that decision. If it hurts, you need to stop.
You also got to know your material, too, because someone will come
Sure.
with this idea, and you'll be like, at first, it's like, God, it's fucking brilliant. But if you don't think down the line, script-wise,
Yeah.
and say, well, wait, that changes this, and that changes this, and that changes that, and then even if they're minor, if you're tipping your hand too soon, then you've undercut yourself. And so what seems like a brilliant idea, and maybe is a brilliant idea in and of itself, is not the best idea for the vehicle that you're, you know, trying to create here.
Which is why I recommend starting with short films, because you go through it the whole. It's like I kind of equate the whole process of a feature to building a house, and a short to building a doghouse. It's all the same thing. You have to do the roof. Shit has to be square. You have to have a door. You have to have a foundation. It's just a lot smaller, and you can finish it a lot quicker. You don't wind up investing 3 years of your life into it. You invest 3 months of your life, and then you kind of have an idea of how the whole framework comes together. What ideas are good, what ideas are bad, and what you can throw away. So I think until you've built a short film that's actually successful and works, you probably shouldn't move on to the whole idea of a feature realm, because it's about, what do you guys think, 10 times more difficult? I mean, it's more difficult.
Yeah, you're going to spend a few years,
Yeah.
on any feature. You're going to just
more money, more time, more resources, and you're building a much larger arc.
Yeah. I think there's an old Chinese proverb that goes, more money, more problems, right?
Yeah.
More money, more problems. I think that's how it goes.
Money and the power of money, minute after minute, hour after hour.
I'm
sorry. Big and small.
No, dude, high five for that.
Yeah.
Wait, no.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to front.
I guess moving on. So, if you guys, how do you guys promote your films? Like, the questions I sent you. We all know the market is sort of oversaturated with a shit ton of awful digital content because of the accessibility of digital media or equipment, which has its pros and cons, definitely, especially for independent filmmakers who want to get out there and shoot stuff. I think it's a really good thing, but also for people who just shoot a bunch of bullshit and put it up on YouTube, I think it's a really bad thing. So given that, I mean, how do you promote your film now?
Can I say something real quick? Because Bob is the king of promotion.
I don't know about that.
Well, you've got a lot of good ideas. One thing I will say, though, about the digital content and the onslaught of all this stuff, I think it's great that the tools are there for people to be able to get experience and be able to create something cheaply. That's fantastic. But there's a big problem that I lived this world. We made like 4 or 5 features in 4 or 5 years back in the late 90s. No one ever saw almost any of them. And the reason is none of them were any good. And it's like so many filmmakers, they want to make a movie more than they want to make their movie. It doesn't really matter what it is. They just want to go do something. And the only thing I'll suggest is you need to learn. The more you shoot, the better you get. The more work you get done, the better it is. But just because you worked hard on it doesn't mean anyone cares. It doesn't mean anyone wants to see it. So these people, you make something, you're like, oh my God, I can't wait to get it out there and screen it. It's like, really have someone look at it before you get it out there, because we don't need more crap.
I like how you preface that all by saying I'm a good promoter.
He is a good promoter, and it's all of his stuff is
So
good,
do you
though.
think more time and care when it was just
I think in the
strictly
end,
film?
if you're going to work so hard and you're going to ask other people to work so hard, really care about what you're trying to do. Like, find a story you want to tell. Don't just want to make a movie. Don't just be like, oh, let's do Reservoir Dogs. Let's do a heist. Let's do this. Like, do something that you really want to go see. That's all I'll say.
And the blessing and the curse of that is a lot of those people that make films with that kind of mindset don't make a second film. Unfortunately, every year there's another crop of those type of people to take their place.
Yeah.
But that's the difficult thing is promoting your films. Like, what do you do? Like, what do you do if you have a film and you think it's good and, other people think it's good and maybe even get some festival screenings or you get some good critical reviews? There's so many films out there. How do you make yourself stand out? What I've done in the past, like I made a movie about roller derby. There's roller derby everywhere. So I team up with roller derby. Our Hell on Wheels is the history book of roller derby. And so every league across the globe knows about the movie and has seen the movie. So we partnered with them. My first film was a narrative film called Rock Opera. It was a stoner movie. We partnered up with High Times and NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, which our movie's not really, doesn't really present weed in a glowing light per se, but it's a pro-weed movie, I guess. Kind of. So, and then we booked a tour. We screened that in 30 cities, 29 cities over 3.5 weeks, and we drove the movie around and set up different screenings, some of which had nobody there, and others of which we had a full house. And it's real hit or miss, and it's a ton of work.
Did that pay for your? Was it kind of like at least breaking even?
Not on that one. I left town with $200 and came in with 14 cents.
Yeah.
But 3.5 week tour, it was pretty badass. It was basically a long party. And, we didn't get arrested on that tour. I did a tour in 2010. I took Hell on Wheels and Total Badass on tour on 2 tours. I did a tour out west for 5 weeks. in 30 cities and did a tour out east for 5 weeks in 30 cities. And that one we did get arrested in, so that part sucked. But we got great reviews. You know, we screened for a week in New York City, so we had New York Times wrote like a quarter-page article on us. It was really good, and the Village Voice and Vice Magazine promoted us. But where am I now? I work at the Continental Club. You know, I work security at the Continental Club. I do freelance film work. So I have a ton of critical acclaim. It doesn't equate to money or financial success in any stretch of the meaning, and it certainly doesn't seem to have proven to make it any easier for me to make films. I don't want to be a wet blanket on all this, but my first film was a narrative film. I would love to do more narrative films, but they're really difficult to get off the ground. You not only have to craft the story, you have to cast, you have to crew it, you have to location it, you have to get the equipment together, you have to con everyone into doing it. And so, I love filmmaking of all sorts. I love documentaries. So after I couldn't get another narrative going, I started making documentaries, simply because I could. And I like documentaries like Hoop Dreams and Harlan County, USA, and Grey Gardens and Billy the Kid. You know, these kind of documentaries that are just following people, sort of verite style, around. And so those are the kind of films that I made because I'm compelled to make movies. I'm fucking stupid, like I said. I don't know what else to do with myself, and I can't not do that. So whatever that vehicle, whatever form that takes, is what I'm going to do. I've made cartoons. You know, I've got 2 kids, and when my kids were young, and I needed to be around the house a lot more, I started making animation because
not for them though.
Not for them, no. None of my movies are for
Bob's the Austin version of John Waters, is what I think.
I need the mustache.
Yeah. But yes, we should look. You should do a narrative. Hold on.
I'm working on it. We've got 30 pages written right now. We'll see.
What do you think, Karen, as far as promotion?
Promotion's tough. You know, I think that the model of being like a kind of indie rock band touring your film is probably the most feasible for most films, especially if you can get, you know, a little bit of festival attention or like just a little bit of, I mean, for docs, you know, it's kind of nice if you can get on, you know, purchased somewhere, and that does happen. You know, you can be on Independent Lens or POV or you know, Sundance Channel, IFC, whatever, and then people see it also, and you know, and that's not. I think a lot of people who make movies love the movie-going experience, and so it's kind of a bummer to think that most people are. Your movie is being turned into a TV show that's not a TV show, and so that's sort of. And then sometimes you have to cut it down too, just to fit whatever, you know, little plug they want to put it into. And so, you know, talk about compromises, you know, but then there are a lot of people who are actually seeing your work, which is great.
They're seeing your compromised work.
But they're seeing your compromised work on TV. You know, so, I mean, I love the communal movie experience. And so I think for a lot of people, unless you get some kind of distribution deal, you know, the kind of hitting the road sort of way is still, you know, the best.
It's fun.
route.
It's certainly fun.
I've never done it, so I can't really say. I've never.
It's a lot of work, but it's also fun.
So I've always just been like, oh God.
What about you, John? Promotion.
Promotion. I don't know. That's always been a kind of a mystery to me. It's I'm definitely into like the creation, but the people that actually go out there and sell it's always been I've always been kind of clueless. I've been fortunate enough to be. I try not to worry about it. I'm just like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and not think about that, because I kind of feel like that's not the right ethic to take. It's like if I'm worried about overly worried about pleasing everyone, then you won't please anyone. And I've been fortunate enough to, you know, as far as festivals go, I had to have our work showcased in some festivals that are fairly high profile. So that whole world is, I kind of feel like it's especially nowadays with the whole distribution paradigm like shifting. Like I really don't know if I'm the best person to answer that. It's like I don't know, and I just kind of trust other people to go with it. And I really don't worry about it. I just try to like focus on like, okay, this is what I want to say. This is the movie I want to make.
Mm-hmm.
And if people like it, then good. And if they don't, okay. Hopefully they at least feel something. You know, like I really fucking hated that movie, or that movie was awesome. You know, it's hopefully it's not like, so.
I think the last question I have for you guys is, given the choice, would you stay small and independent, or would you work your way up through the Hollywood system with bigger budgets, bigger productions, and why? What are the pros and cons of staying small and independent and working on a $100 million picture? Start with Karen.
Okay. Well, I think that I was drawn to this way of working, and this is pretty much the way that I like it. That said, if someone gave me $100 million to make a movie, I would be all about it. And I actually think that, you know, a lot of people who work in this way could make something that communicates to a wider audience, and that Hollywood is really stymied, and, you know, that there's so many things that could break through if there were just courage, you know, from the financiers. So I would never discount that as something that, you know, could happen and that I would be open to. But I'm sure, you know, even just from, you know, you stick in this long enough, you start to see your friends ascending around you and getting big budgets, and, you know, and so just from that, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I see. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be some problem, you know. And so, you know, I feel like right now I'm in kind of a, it's tricky, but at least there's, because I work across genres, there's like little pots of money that I just kind of grab from. And then I also, you know, earn a living as an editor. So I'm always working in film. And I mean, sometimes it's depressing to be editing when you want to be making your own work, you know, or to be doing anything besides making your own work when you want to make your own work. So that's the one, like, part about, I think, taking this road that is really, if you've been doing it for, you know, over a decade, you're just like, golly, how long can I keep this up, you know, sometimes.
It's part of being crazy, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing, you know, what I always ask myself is, I'm just like, well, what would I do if I stopped? What would that feel like? I'm just like, I can't imagine it, you know. So that's simple enough.
I'm not sure my sensibilities jive with the deep pocket